Our next artist that we're going to be looking at is Michelangelo Buonarroti. And Michelangelo, we're going to get a little background information on him in this video and then look at his most noted sculptures that he created. This artist was a contemporary of Da Vinci, although quite a bit younger. He was born in 1475 and lived to be well into his 80s and working up until his death. So a lot of work that we'll see created by Michelangelo. Background information on him: his father was said to have a negative attitude. He was unhappy and a discontented person. And unfortunately, his mother died when she was very young. Despite the adversities that he went through, he pursued his love of art, and at the young age of 13 was an apprentice of a Florentine painter. And then at 14 years old, he studied sculpture. And then from there, he made a huge body of work that we're going to be looking at. He worked under Pope Leo X and Pope Clemente VII. And he was primarily a sculptor. He thought of himself as a sculptor first and then a painter. And although he was extremely talented in both, he viewed his sculpting as really what was in his heart and his passion for creating. All right, so this sculpture is called the Pieta, and it is carved out of marble. We have the size of 5'9" by 6'5", and it's located in St. Peter's Basilica, which is in Rome. He sculpted it in 1498 and finished it in 1499. And Michelangelo was only 24 years old when he sculpted this piece. Pieta, when translated, means pity. And really what this is representing is the penetrating sorrow of a mother. Mary's face, we're going to look at the emotive qualities, how this is making us feel, is emanating sweetness, serenity, and acceptance of immense sorrow. Her son has just been crucified. He's been killed, and he was a sacrifice. This was said to have been necessary in order to save mankind and allow forgiveness of sins of man. It was something that was necessary. Christ was the Son of God, but also in human form was the Son of Mary. She is presenting the body to the viewer as if saying, "This is the path to salvation, and this was my sacrifice." Still heartbroken, but coming to terms. And you can see her left hand is uplifted as if this is out of my hands. It was a necessary thing. The things I want you to notice for a second before we go over this is just look closely at the size of Christ's body in comparison to Mary, and in particular, her legs, the lower portion of Mary. What you may notice is that her whole body seems to be a lot bigger than the body of Christ. And Christ is actually a grown man at this point, and Mary is an older mother, smaller. She should be smaller in size. But Michelangelo intentionally made Mary bigger and her legs, especially to support the weight of Christ, but also to exaggerate the feebleness of Jesus, because he, in his human form, is in this feeble state. And also the other thing is that the Pieta is viewed from below, and it's lifted up about 6 feet off the ground on a staged area. So it's exaggerating the foreshortening. The extreme detail here, you can see the flesh under Christ's armpit is pushed up because his body weight is hanging off of her arms. The fabric again, we see the scar here that was said to have been a puncture wound from a sword before he was crucified, and then close-ups of their faces. The second piece of sculpture we're looking at is the sculpture of David. And we will be, doing more of this in class, comparing the two. But, this sculpture is out of marble, unlike the earlier one that we'd seen in the early Renaissance that was bronze. And it was carved out of a single piece of marble. Originally, it was 17 feet high chunk of marble. It was a statue completed without flaw. We have this sculpted as a symbol of Florence facing a large enemy. Just like David faced the enemy of Goliath, Florence is also experiencing, or was experiencing, a similar situation with a rival country. And although they were the underdog, they came out victorious, retaining their sovereignty. This is the first colossal nude since ancient times. Again, a huge deal during that period because nudity was not seen as acceptable, but now we're in the Renaissance period and a rebirth of classical thought and thinking. The human body, this belief that the human beauty is the outward indication of divine spirit. It's a revival of that thinking. We have a compact pose, very little negative space. And the pose of David himself, if you're looking at his body, most of his weight is in his right leg. That is called the contrapposto pose. Very, very common thing that you see during the Renaissance. We have David facing Goliath. Again, Goliath was said to be a giant. He was the only one willing to go up against this enemy. He's just caught sight of his enemy. He's getting ready for his attack. You can see his body, his head is turned to the side. Looks relaxed, yet confident. His right hand is holding the stone. His left is a slingshot that it was said he defeated the giant with. A single stone, single rock to his head. At the age of 29, Michelangelo, after sculpting this, was declared the greatest sculptor in Italy. Some describe this as a godlike being, half Apollo and half Hercules. It is, here's a close-up of the face. Again, the extreme realism in the hair. The veins, he went down to the detailing of veins and the size, the sheer size of this piece. It was placed in the square of Florence and then moved inside to keep it protected indoors at the Academy, which is where you see this here. There is a duplicate that is outside where the original sculpture was. Pope Julius II, a quick rundown on him because he ended up being a huge patron of the arts and responsible for some of the work that we're going to see here in a little bit from Michelangelo. He was referred to as the warrior pope. He had a taste for the colossal. The Sistine Chapel ceiling, his tomb, and the papal apartments were all work that he commissioned. He commissioned work to represent his authoritative image and reinforce the primacy of the Catholic Church. He saw the importance of having artwork there and noted. This was paid for by Pope Julius II. It was meant to be seen from below, so that's the reason for the leg positioning here. And again, the legs are a lot bigger, similar to what we saw with Pieta and Mary's legs. We have this sculpted in 1513 to 1515, again out of marble. It's 8 feet 4 inches high. This is, if you're looking at the background of this story here of the sculpture, we have horns on Moses. This was a sculpture of Moses, who's a biblical character. But the interesting thing is that the horns, what it boils down to is a mistranslation. The Latin version in Exodus 34:29 said, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, he did not know the skin of his face shone because he had been talking with God. Shone in Latin means cornuta. Cornu meaning horn. So, but the original Hebrew, the word meant shone. Moses, so it was just a mistranslation is why he has the horns.